All right.
Please. Thank you.
So, okay. Uh, Thank you everyone for coming here today. As you can see on this, well, slide, there was a picture that was supposed to be there, but I didn't find any picture in the end, so I left this placeholder. And you'll have to imagine with ad hoc concept construction what picture could fit in there. And what I want to suggest today is a different approach to, well, ad hoc meaning, incidentally, and and I'll try to tackle it with a different perspective. So without any further ado, my main proposal here today is to plainly say that encyclopedic information are affordances. So this come as a full package. So it actually implies some sub-proposals we will detail. So the first one is that we're going beyond comprehension. Comprehension is a preparation of action. Meaning with affordances, essentially words point to affordances. And all of that is organized structure hierarchically and with goals. And we're going to suggest that this is what's happening in mutual parallel adjustment. So before that, so what's the view of cognition we have today in pragmatics? And this is the traditional view. So you can see we start from perception and then which serves as input to comprehension processes. And then at some point, we don't have a theory for that in relevant theory, but we know it influences actions as outputs. Relevant theory only really cares about this middle parts. And but if we see the ethologist view, we see that it's another picture. The comprehension bit disappeared, and essentially, comprehension is only a preparation to action, and it doesn't have like a unique status to it. So what if we saw comprehension as a preparation to action, as it's the case here? But it also entails a different view on cognition in terms of what is what is cognition about. In relevant theory, we have an epistemologic view on the matter. It's to deliver knowledge, and ethology is different in the sense that it cares about action, interaction, and knowledge is not an end in itself. In relevant theory, we have two goals, arguably minimizing cognitive efforts, maximizing effects which are improvements of knowledge. And in ethology, we have as many goals as we need to survive. So to make this preparation to action bit work in relevant theory, we need something that relates to action from close or far. So a common building block, and you might have guessed it's affordance I'm going to propose. Affordance are action possibilities offered by the environment to an agent and according to its capabilities. A chair might afford sitting to all of us, but it won't afford to an elephant. And it will afford sitting when you are trying to relax and to find a place to relax. And this chair might also afford other kind of uses according to other contexts, such as you can use it as a weapon. I don't recommend it, but you can, and etc. So we use affordances to explain animal behavior, such as see this monkey on its branch with, there's a blueberry which affords reachable and less desirable. It's just next to less desirable than what? Than these apples there. But those apples are like further away. So the monkey needs to mesh walkable as an affordance from those branches to then reach the conclusion, the affordance reachable of those apples to get to those red apples. But we also see something similar in human problem solving. I'm taking images from Barsalu, a famous researcher in embodied cognition, but also in development of other concepts. And I'm taking from his work the example of changing the light bulb. Generally, light bulbs are a bit high up, so you need a an object to give you a boost. And so look at this room. What are the items you can use to give you a boost and reach the light bulb? And you can reach the same conclusion as I did, basically the table, the stool, the chair, but don't use a cat. They are not a flat, solid surface, and they're not stable enough. So, but now let's just change what you want to do right now, your goal. You want something to wedge the door. You look at the room again and look for potential candidates. And this time you have a different list. The accordion and the iron set are now eligible items to use as door wedges, and others remained not unconsidered. Why is that? It's because of the properties, of course, but those properties can also be used in a communicative context. Let's say an example, you're at a cafe with your friend and it's time to pay after some time. So your friend asks you, do you have money? What kind of money are we talking about? We have different options, cash, credit card, phone nowadays, but checks probably not, unless you're American. I know they still use checks a lot. So all those options are not considered as the kind of money we're talking about here. In a different context, at a car show, you desperately want to buy this luxury car, and your friend asks you, do you have money? You have guessed it, it's not the same kind of money we're talking about this time. Bank transfers become valid option, checks, credit cards. If you're a billionaire, I mean, I don't know if you can use credit cards, to be honest, but cash no longer an option unless you're in the mafia. So what all of these examples have in common? So they were non-communicative cases and communicative ones, but they all involved ad hoc concept constructions. They are goal directed. It depends on the context. You have different means to achieve this goal, and means are selected according to their goal relevant properties, aka affordances in this presentation. The only difference I would like to highlight here is that those communicative cases used problem solving as a way to reach the speaker's meaning, alongside also maybe preparing you to act in a certain way. So other concept irrelevant theory, we have a theory for that. It's mutual parallel adjustment. It's basically you start from a literal concept which you narrow or broaden following a path of least efforts, and you stop when expectations are satisfied. What is adjusted are encyclopedic information, to use this ad hoc concept. If I tell you she's a tiger on the basketball court, you start with tiger, the huge wildcat, and then you enrich it successively with information about tigers and basketball and other contextual elements to reach this ad hoc tiger concept, an aggressive player, but certainly not an animal. If we come back to the cafe example, you have money. We successively enrich it or broaden it to give well, a certain kind of money. Do you have enough money to pay the bill? So we saw it includes different kinds of money, but not others. And now the question, I mean, this comment I raise is, in relevance theory, the goals are in the background and not central. But here we can clearly see they orient relevance in a certain direction. So the question is, how do we go to a goal-oriented view? And one of those solutions is to use affordances. If I tell you the water is boiling, well, you will access boiling, the encyclopedic properties of boiling. You can see bubbles, you can see vapor or undercurrents, etc. But that's especially if you use it in a non-metaphorical way, because you can use it boiling in a metaphorical way. In this case, it's too hot to wash your hands in, or warm enough to make tea, but not warm enough to, well, to be considered as literally boiling in. You can also use it for other uses in a more metaphorical way. So the properties you use are necessary for one to make sense of the speaker's utterance. That's the communicative goal in this situation. And secondly, maybe it's also, I mean, not maybe, it also prepares you to act accordingly to a contextual goal, which is not communicative. So all these encyclopedic properties could be reinterpreted as affordances for different uses, different goals, etc., situations. The idea that words point to affordances is not new. It's been proposed already by Glenberg and Robertson, who proposed that basically word meaning comes from meshing affordances and under the guidance of syntax. If I read the following sentence, after wading barefoot in the lake, Eric used his shirt to dry his feet. And the second sentence, after wading barefoot in the lake, Eric used his glasses to dry his feet. You might say, but it doesn't make sense. The second sentence, glasses cannot be used to dry one's feet, and you'd be right. And what they observed is that shirt is used at a normal speed, just like you would read towel instead, and not glasses, because you don't bear the compatible glasses, the affordances to make sense of drying one's feet with it. They have various evidence to support the claim, namely the action sentence compatibility effect, which tells you that essentially utterance, basically when you're about to start an action, if you read a word at the same time, there will be a facilitating or impeding effect on the time you will take to make the action, and also vice versa. If you hold an item in your hand and you are processing a sentence at the same time, it might influence the comprehension of said sentence. There are also various brain evidence, such as if I tell you the word grasp, hands area in your brain will be activated. And there's also an interesting parallel between neologisms and problem solving. By that I mean, if I tell you a siren and I use it as a verb, siren de Porsche, to siren de Porsche, or conversely, if I use a verb to embed as a noun, James was an embed. You use relevant affordances from the source grammatical category and you use it in a new one. And there's an interesting parallel to be made with using a chair as a door wedge or as a makeshift mace unlike its original purpose. So now the one problem I have with that account is that I don't think syntax is good enough to account for all cases, namely the non-communicative cases. And I would like instead to use a relevance-based procedure, which I think is more robust. However, I will add a bit of this syntactical ID in the form of hierarchy of goals. So what do I mean by hierarchy of goals? And to explain that notion, we must first start to explain hierarchical affordance competition. So Cizek and Pezzulo have proposed a model in which basically processes in our brain are basically competitions of affordances. So these competitions, because they happen in parallel, are organized hierarchically with goals, sub-goals, and then affordances, different layers, and they are happening in parallel and they mutually influence one another via top-down and bottom-up signals. So it sounds an awful lot like mutual parallel adjustment. So is it the same? To further reinforce the claim that this is competition happening in our brain, Spub and Wilson in their more recent papers have already hinted for multi-layered competition, namely that in the 2015 that you have competitions between different conclusions determined by activation and inhibition. And in the last paper, you have also, they talk about multi-stage competition between pieces of information, and they also talk about competition between interests, between goals. So how does it work? I mean, how can we use it? So in that sense, we don't really agree with the idea that, that cognitive activity is not always task or goal oriented. In that sense, we would rather take a different perspective, and we actually say that goals are important in every step. So what are goals? What are they used for, or what is their role? So goals are higher order layers. They propagate top-down expectations to lower layers, and this will bias competition until either these expectations are fulfilled or the goal is dropped entirely. And themselves, the goals are also competing with one another to influence decision making via bottom-up inferences. This parallels well with what's happening in neural competition in our brain. So if we have as a main goal, as a monkey, satiate hunger, we have the choice between picking a berry or an apple. And bottom up, you also have different affordances competing, but the berry is much more reachable. The affordances to reach it, to make it work, are much more accessible. So maybe the monkey might just pick the berry, but if you love apples way more, they're way more desirable, a top-down influence will search for more affordances to make it work, and maybe the branch is workable, so then the apple is reachable. So we can apply that format to comprehension, and we would basically end up with hierarchical mutual parallel adjustment, in which you have a comprehension goal at the very top, sub-goals competing at the second layer, and at the very bottom, affordances competing. If we take the do you have money example at a cafe, you see at the very top, we want to understand money. Second layer, different kinds of paying competing. After that, different kinds of affordances, properties competing, and at the very bottom, different options to pay whatever we want. So, of course, the context will make a certain goal win over others, paying a coffee, for instance. And this, in turn, will also influence competition. Different properties will be selected, but others drop. A large sum will be inhibited. And at the very last, those affordances will favor some over others. They have different relationships to those properties, different associations, and some properties, some options will be just discarded. They're not discarded because they just have been, they may have not been considered in the first place because of priming, inhibition, etc. The context happened and influenced all those at the same time. So you also have all those layers. I show them in a linear way, but they're also influencing each other mutually and parallel. We can also try that to explain metaphorical meaning, except that a caveat I want to address, is that those different goals may not be always competing with one another. Sometimes different options, different affordances may only achieve relevance together instead of against one another. So goal hierarchies help us, brings a way to describe mutual parallel adjustment, frame it as a competition, essentially. Goals are also described here as the engine of relevance. They basically are what frames the search for relevance. And essentially, it also brings us a way to account for action on top of comprehension, because it's just, an extension. So in conclusion, affordance are an interesting building block to tackle meaning in general, but also word meaning, as I have tried to show you. And words as affordances is a full package. You cannot just plug it and expect it to work. You need to bring other concepts such as actions, hierarchies, goals, etc. Basically this hierarchical structure. So this view, comprehension as a preparation to action, will basically invites us to rethink some of the about some of the premises we take for granted in relevant theory, and maybe bring a more evolutionary psychologist view into it. So now that I've said that, there may be some social affordances or some affordances unique to words, and I want to bring your attention that maybe words trigger the communicative principle based on those affordances, but it will require more theoretical development on that. So thank you very much for attention, and I would be happy and glad to welcome some of your questions.
Thank you, Ishmael. So we do seem to have one question. So Stavros, please
Yes.
unmute yourself. Thank you.
Sorry, hi. I wanted to clap basically, but yeah, it's okay. I also had not a question. It's more of a to the extent that because I didn't come in from the very, very beginning. I think that you're onto something really interesting here. What I'm not sure about is your use of the term affordances in this specific context. Like, wouldn't it make sense rather than posit all these options as competition between different options and whatever have you, to just say that the system goes ahead following the principle of relevance, yada, 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 and just takes the first thing that comes to mind? Because this would like decrease a lot the cognitive load. Like if you go back to that slide where you were putting all the alternatives, it's insane. I really don't think that.
Okay,
This is
a clarification I want to bring about those. You never consider paying a luxury car because they have been negatively primed in your brain. It's
exactly.
the same.
So basically,
Yeah.
context,
So basically, you never
that,
consider those options. So cognitively speaking, it still works for a path of least effort. But I mean, if you have other comments, you can go.
No, I mean, I
fire
know
ahead.
it still works. I don't know why you need to distinguish between like social and non-social and whatever have you. Like, I mean, if it works for the path of least effort, whatever comes to mind first.
Yeah.
What the context times, right? I mean, you don't need to have a social aspect and a non-social aspect or
Of
an
course. Well,
embodied aspect. Right?
I see what you mean. Yeah, but yeah, you're right. Maybe there's no point in differentiating those two categories. But yeah, I try to do that to, well, basically reframe the comprehension procedure as a kind of competition between pieces of information. And I think this is one of the ways we can achieve that, closer to what we do in animal cognition. But yeah, I agree with you.
Thanks. Yeah, that was my comment. And just as a general comment, I mean, to a certain extent, I don't think that the comprehension is a goal in its own. I mean, it's just a means to an end, right? The goal is to get cognitive. So, comprehension just helps with that. So it's not necessary that we just comprehend,
Yeah, you're totally right. It's not the end of the story. It's on it. Is it the beginning? I mean, it's part of the process. That's how I want to frame it.
Thank you
But
very
yeah,
much. Really interesting.
you're welcome.
Thank you. So I think we have one more question. Fabio, please unmute. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I thank you for this inspiring work, Ismael.
Thank you.
It helps me it helps me to explain how different abductive hypotheses compete each other to be the best plausible one in my goal conciliation theory. So it's not a question, but I invite you to share some our works to improve each other. Okay, thank you very
of course. So how is your theory called? I need to take a note.
Goal conciliation theory.
Conciliation theory. Thank you very much. It's noted down. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions from the floor? If not, let's thank Ishmael again. And the next speaker would be Kate, and it's good. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, 3 minutes to be exact.